Hey friends, Abby Ritchie here. Welcome to Tech Smarter. This is the place where we talk with innovators, operators, and investors who are actively engaged in aging services. It's an exciting place to be. There's so much happening here. And before we get started, I just want to thank our sponsors, Arizona Leading Age, and also the Smarter Service for producing this episode. Now, if you are a caregiver or a senior living operator and you're struggling with your residents' tech questions, we want you to reach out to us. Go ahead and DM me anytime on LinkedIn, and I will get right back to you. We know that this is a growing need and we're here to serve. Now, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and bring my guest on to the show. Today, we have Matt Smith of Speak2. Welcome to Tech Smarter, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so honored. We met last year at a conference, and I knew that there was an additional conversation that we needed to have here. And then for anyone who is not familiar with Speak2 and how you landed here, could you please let us know?
Sure, yeah. Speak2 started about 5 to 6 years ago. Like a lot of people in senior living, I had a personal need, which was my mother couldn't text. She was macular degeneration, had really struggled to communicate with the rest of her family because she couldn't use a phone or text and tap and swipe. So I built a little pilot project around Amazon's Alexa so that she could use her voice to communicate with us and kind of participate back into the texting world. And one thing led to another. I had some friends in senior living. I told them about it, and suddenly it became a company. In 2020, I met my business partner, Jillian Guerra, and it took off from there. Once we kind of put our heads together, it gelled into something much bigger than just fixing my mom's problem, and it turned into a whole platform.
Tell me about that platform, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Speak2, we call ourselves a marketplace. So in senior living, there's a lot of different point solutions. A lot of people think about engagement solutions, maintenance systems, things like that. We consider ourselves a marketplace in the sense that we provide content and services through our platform. So thinking about a senior living community, there are 100, 150 people living there. There's certain content that they should be getting. There's announcements, there's notifications. There are things that family, friends, care staff, everyone who's in the community is communicating to the residents, but they're also communicating with each other through social posts, through comments. So we provide a way for everyone to communicate with each other at whatever acuity level they're at. So they might be using, an app on a phone. They might be using their voice with Alexa. They might be using a tablet that they talk to. They might be interacting with their TV. And then on the other end, you have staff and the company that is caring for them. So we provide a whole bunch of tools and items for them, whether it be a marketplace of services. So we have about 1,000 pre-built services that can be provided to the residents, a request system, content management, document management, social stuff. We're trying to encapsulate all of the concepts around content and services for the contained environment of a senior living community.
I love it. For so many of us who are in senior living, it's because we've been impacted in one way or another and have gotten drawn in. I just love to hear that type of story. And in my experience working with older adults, I have been trying to push the platform of using your voice to accomplish a multitude of tasks, because from what I've seen and from I know what you saw with your mother is that as we age, we lose our eyesight, we lose the dexterity in our fingers, and the more that we can activate using voice today, the better your technology is going to serve you in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it seems obvious when you're in the thick of it, like I am and like you are, that voice technology is so perfect for people as they age, and it's a very simple technology. It's really just a matter of speaking to, again, a tablet. It can be talking to your TV or your TV remote or an Alexa device. It's just the easiest way for someone to get help, to get content, to communicate with someone. And it doesn't mean that that's the only way that someone might communicate. They might be using their TV to get content, see signage, or they might have a tablet that they're doing some things with. But the most immediate, simple way for someone to interact with someone else is just to speak out. And so we've seen a lot of success with that. We've seen a lot of adoption of different voice technologies. I'd say, well over half of our customers, our users, are using some sort of voice platform to interact with our system and each other. And yeah, it's a really great avenue for people to go down.
Yeah, you mentioned the TV, and I think that's like the very best thing that we can do is build services and technology into the TV. It's often the one device that an older adult feels most comfortable with because it's been in their life for their entire life, and it often takes up the most amount of space on someone's wall, in someone's home. It's in constant use, and yet it's taken just like within the past maybe 5 years people to realize like, hey, let's turn this device into something more active rather than just a passive opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what we're seeing recently is not only TV manufacturers, but just, companies like Amazon. TVs are becoming more interactive. And I think there's an expectation now that, when I'm consuming media, I want to be able to comment. I want to be able to react to it. And, to your point, the TV is kind of the central hub within, especially in senior living in the apartment. And sometimes that's a negative. You don't want someone just watching TV all day, but it is a great environment to have the accessibility to services. A lot of the older generation is still using cable, right? So it's not as interactive. It's still more push media, but we're seeing more and more streaming happening within senior living, and they have that remote in their hand, and that remote, you very easily press a button on it and talk to the remote and interact as if you were using voice, or you can just use a remote to navigate on the screen and just select, very easily select a service. I need maintenance to come and hang a picture. I need housekeeping. I need help. It's a great medium, and it's very comfortable. And one of the things that I know you guys do at Smarter Service is, you meet people where they are. And, we try to do the same thing. If someone is a heavy TV user, let's give them tools on the TV. If someone, is sitting at a desk all day, maybe Alexa's a better thing. If they're on their phone, they can use their phone. We need to meet seniors where they are and have the acuity level match the technology.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of improvements in this technology over the years, especially like you said, just being able to speak into your remote in order to find something on TV. This is technology I've taught many of my clients, including my mom, to use. And I just feel like it has transformed their ability to find things, because oftentimes when things are hidden in a menu and they have to use a remote to, tab along to find something in a menu, like it's so complicated and takes so many steps. What kind of, simplifications have you been able to implement to make it easier for an older adult to navigate a menu?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we find is that, products aren't necessarily designed for people who are aging. So to your point, navigating, especially in a streaming platform, you're clicking around, the icons are small. You can easily click the wrong thing. You don't know what's highlighted. So, we've purposefully designed for simplicity and for, for the eyes of someone who's aging. So, the font has to be a certain size. There has to be a lot of contrast in your colors and in your backgrounds. And really the interface needs to be really intuitive. You can't have someone looking for, how do I do something? If someone needs to ask for help, it should be right there on the screen. A big button, I need help. You press it, and now it's soliciting, what do you need help with? If I need to order something, there should be a big button that says order service. The calendar should be really obvious. It's something that I think years ago, when technology was first evolving, a lot of technology was like that because it was all new to everybody. For those of us old enough to remember, the beginning of all this. But because things have evolved so much, we've kind of forgotten that simplicity was really effective. So we just try to make things really simple and effective.
I love it. I love it. And one of my key words I would say when working with clients is KISS, keep it simple, senior, and anytime like I give instructions, like I just try to keep it simple. It doesn't mean that I'm going to dumb it down in any way, but I'm not going to get overly techy, because that usually relates and actually turns into exclusionary
Yes.
work. So,
Yeah.
and then the other thing, like I noticed that you said was, just keeping it really simple and keeping it senior centric, for instance. And in my experience working with so many innovators and their products and actually implementing them with older adults, hey, I found that the user interface is not simple. And a lot of times I'm like, did you market this? Did you test it?
Yeah.
And because simple to a working professional is vastly different to simple for an older adult.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. We struggle when we're selling our product, when we're showing people our product. There are some customers that they say they want, this elevated user experience, and it really should look beautiful and nice. And they're looking at it from the perspective of someone who's not a senior and saying like, wow, the user interface should be, really elegant. And when you show something that is intended for older adults, it doesn't necessarily look as elegant and as slick as what a younger person is going to be used to seeing. And to some people, that's a turnoff. And they're thinking, well, that doesn't look great. Okay, but if you're in a situation where you're sitting at a desktop or a laptop or on your TV, and you have a lot going on, and you just need some really strong contrast and big buttons, it doesn't have to be elegant. It has to be utilitarian, and that's what our focus is. So, I know you guys are training everybody on how to do this and supporting them. So, I would think from your perspective, it's got to be really frustrating to see some of these really complex interfaces.
Yeah, it's not only frustrating, it's very discouraging. And in my experience, when I've heard someone say, "Oh, it's plug and play," I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 no!" Like, it is like, rarely ever is it plug and play or as easy as one, two, three. And so part of it has to do with like just changing the conception and the instruction and the implementation. And one thing I have noticed, and we've been able to notice this at the Smarter service in the past couple of years, is that a lot of this burden of explaining the technology often lands on the caregiver, who has multiple logins, multiple apps across various devices, which can be totally confusing. And I'm just thinking about how you can simplify that into one unified platform. And how have you guys been able to manage that?
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle. We have a staff app, and it's hard because you want to get everything in there because you do want it to be one stop. Hey, everything you need to do during your day is here. The thing is, what people need to do during the day is a lot of stuff. These,
Yeah.
care staff wear so many hats. They're caring for people, but they're also a psychologist. They're interacting with family. They're a brand ambassador. They're helping with activities. They're helping with meals. So we take a slightly different approach for the care side than we do for the resident side. So we have two user bases. In our care app, we do try to make it very sort of industry standard or app standard. We're using the same font awesome library that they're used to, that they see in most other apps. And again, they're in the workflow of their day. Big cards, big ticket items have to be presented directly. And when they want to dive into something more specific, if they want to go, if someone asks them what's on the menu, all right, there might be a little icon for that, but then it's got to come up big and clear and simple again. We also encourage our care staff to use the resident tools with the residents, right? They should be modeling the behavior. Hey, if you want to know how to get this content, let me do it with you in your environment. So they're not just using their own tools. So it's an interesting interplay between residents, staff, families. We're always balancing the user interfaces of meeting people where they are, but then being aware, especially for staff, sometimes where they are changes 5 times within an hour. So we have to try to accommodate that as well.
Yeah, when we simplify the caregiver's experience, we actually give them back the time to be a companion. And that's something that we want to do for sure. Whether it's a TV, a tablet, or an Alexa, things invariably and inevitably will need some troubleshooting.
Mhm.
maybe even daily. I don't know. But that's why we launched the Smarter service. Why is having a dedicated tech concierge so vital when you're deploying an ecosystem of multiple devices?
Yeah. As a vendor, I can unequivocally say it's critical. You know, tech support in a senior living community can't be overlooked. It usually falls, maybe to the maintenance person or like whoever the youngest person is on staff. Um, Everything that everyone is doing is touching technology, whether it's a resident, staff, family. When you're coming in to sign in, technology is core to all of our activity, especially for someone who's trying to get a job done that is so important, like caring for people.
Yeah.
And like you said, you need to give back some of their time. They can't be struggling with this app isn't working, Wi-Fi is down. How do I do this? And then you get into the residents and they just want to print something, and something has changed and they just need help. And you can't just take that for granted and think, well, technology is just something we don't really do here. That's just not the case. Every resident is engaging with technology. You have to have tech support in a community.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for saying that. I mean, we don't expect residents to fix their own plumbing. We certainly should not expect them to be their own IT department.
Right.
And what we found is that like this situation did not exist, let's say 10 years ago. All right.
Mhm.
10 years ago, the high demand for resident tech support and the way the residents are moving in with multiple devices, right? Like that didn't exist 10 years ago. And so what's happened is like a whole slew of band-aid solutions just to fix it, but
Yeah.
not to repair it permanently. So, and that's what we've seen happen over and over. And like you said, like sometimes it falls on maintenance, sometimes it falls on the front desk, sometimes it falls on whoever is actually in the hallway right then and there. So it's like a drain on every department on every level, and a lot of it doesn't get tracked because it's so diversified and like it's pulling from so many different places.
Yeah. And I think that's where like our worlds kind of come together, right? We're trying to do things in the flow of the day without disrupting someone. So we're attempting to say, okay, this just has to happen, right? Like using an NFC chip or, something that just is easy for residents and staff to just do that doesn't disrupt them. But I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you're not going to ask residents don't hang their own pictures, right? Like they're going to get assistance. That's why they're there.
Yeah.
I would even say, 10 years ago, it's probably even 5 years ago that, Wi-Fi wasn't even ubiquitous across senior living. And now residents are coming in with a tablet, maybe they have like, one of those frames with pictures. They have a TV that's complex. They might have a laptop. I mean, there's a lot of technology in every resident's room, and you can't disrupt. There's a real ROI to supporting that appropriately, because to your point, the front desk is doing a ton of things. IT support is not in their job description, right?
Yeah.
But people are going to help, so they're going to go and try and help. I mean, this is taking away a little bit, and it's not just IT help, it's a lot of little things that just come up that should be routed to the appropriate person. So it's amazing that you guys are providing that kind of support, and what we hope that we're doing is we're routing what is needed to the appropriate person at the appropriate time.
Yes, and that happens with data and a clearly designed program to take in that information. So I was just going to say though, I was remembering back to just 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, there were a lot of communities that didn't have Wi-Fi in all their buildings, and what a crazy shame that was to come up at the same time as COVID, right? Like it
Right.
accelerated the connectivity. And the same way that we look at this type of Wi-Fi connectivity, we view this at the Smarter service, like having this type of tech concierge support is part of infrastructure, right? Like you got to have it in place because it's going to offset and bring you that type of ROI, like you mentioned. So it's really something that we are trying to change the narrative around, and not just to have that tech support in place, but it's also part of the digital divide that's occurring. There's so many people who want to learn, but they don't have the resources or the structure in place to do just that. And it has been an uphill battle. So I really appreciate your support in that area. Curious about how family members can use your platform as well as caregivers just to catch and see any potential issues that might come up.
Yep. So we do have a family app and website. It's interesting. We provide a lot of transparency to families. So a big part of what we have is there's just a feed of any interaction, any staff interacting with a resident, staff sending announcements, contacts being added, calls happening, whatever's happening, we put into a feed, kind of like a Facebook feed for the community to see. It's really important data because the community gets all this data that they can act on and look it on people and see who's at risk and all those things. But families also get their sort of little world of that feed about their loved one. So families want to know. I mean, I have family in assisted living. Did anybody visit my mom this morning? Did they eat? Are they getting the ride to the doctor that they're supposed to get? What's on their calendar? And I don't want to just know what's on the community calendar. I want to know if there's anything specific to my parents that is on the calendar. So that's what we provide. We provide a lot of transparency. It scares some communities who are not necessarily ready for that level of transparency. But what we have found, I would say 99.99% of the time is communities are providing so much more than anyone knows because it's not tracked. So families will come in and say, no one saw my mom yesterday. And the care staff will say, I checked on her twice. She pressed her pendant 3 times. She came down to the front desk, talked to the concierge for 5 minutes, but none of that's tracked. So although it's scary a little bit at first, what we find is that there's a lot more going on. There's great care being provided, and that transparency puts a lot of people at ease. And again, about ROI, it lessens the amount of phone calls and difficult conversations because families are informed, which is really all they want anyway. So we try to keep a lot of transparency. There are some guardrails in there that communities can manage so that there aren't dangerous situations or risks with privacy and things like that. But we think transparency to families is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're going to share this kind of information with a senior living leader who maybe doesn't know how to start or what they should work on or focus on in terms of technology, what would be the piece of technology or insight that you would share with them?
I think what's interesting about senior living, the structure is interesting, right? Because you have the people operating the communities, you have the people who are usually at corporate level, and then you have an ownership group that might not be hands-on, involved, or might be more real estate based. And I think the first step, I think, is aligning all of that a little bit better. Recognizing, as you talked about earlier, that technology is crucial. It's not a should we investment. It's a we have to investment. And that's kind of the first thing I start with is, are you acknowledging and recognizing how important it is to have the right technology for your residents, for family, for staff, for corporate? It provides so much benefit to everybody. The data is important. So we really just want an acknowledgement. You need to align across all of the ecosystem how important technology is. And then we just encourage people to just do something, right? The first step might just be, to your point, Wi-Fi, or let's put a kiosk in the front desk, or let's get a resident app. Acting on doing something to move the needle forward shouldn't be something that requires a year or two of thinking about it. There are a lot of things that can be done that are not terribly expensive, that can have a big impact and can be adopted, within a few months, that I think people should start looking at right away and not putting it off.
Yeah, 100%. So, and I always like to ask people, with so much changing in the face of technology and so much adoption, when you look forward to the next, say, 5 or 6 years, the year 2030, for instance, how will all of these platforms work together?
Wow, that's such a great question, a huge question, right? I mean, so much is in flux right now because of the way AI is impacting how we code and how fast we can get things to market. So it's hard to say because of the rate of change happening right now. I do think that interoperability should be a requirement. I mean, I think now that more modern systems are being built, like our system was built to be interoperable, right? There's an open API. We share APIs with anybody. We share our data with anybody. That wasn't always the case. And I think as we evolve, maybe 2 years from now, 4 years from now, I think it will be an expectation that we have to be interoperable. We can't have these siloed systems where my EHR doesn't talk to my dining system, which doesn't
No.
talk to my engagement system. We're attempting to cover a lot of things, but we know we're not going to cover everything, and you probably have some things already in play, and there might be a better solution in some area than us. So let's make it interoperable so that we're doing the best thing for everybody. So I think that's where things will be down the road, is a lot of interoperability.
I love it. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Where is the best place for someone to connect with you?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest. With the name Matt Smith, it's not easy to find me on anything. But if you find me on LinkedIn, search for me, Matt Smith, or Matt Smith Speak2. You can find us on our website, but I would love to connect with people on LinkedIn and talk more about all this stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your innovation that's helping so many people. And thank you also for those that are joining us in the chat. We love your feedback, and we will see you all back here next week.